It is time now to take a look at the week's headlines making news this week with our Reporters Rewind. Our guests at the round table are Wendy Wilson, news editor for Essence Magazine, and June Thomas, culture critic for Slate.com. And we thank you both for joining us. Do appreciate it. We have a lot to talk about. I probably say this every week. It's been a big news week, but it really has been a big news week. And I want to start off with this tragic story, and that is the smugglers' boat off the coast of Lampedusa, where 500 African migrants went into the sea, and over 300 did not survive this. Let me just start here. And June, you're new to the table, so I'll start with you as the newbie. What was your reaction when you just first heard the story?
I mean, tragedy, of course, and just one of those terrible things that it is a problem that doesn't seem to be able to be solved. We see it over and over again. Again, today, another boat has sunk, another 200 lives at least lost. And there doesn't seem to be an obvious solution. That's always so much easier when you can just pressure someone and figure that, well, this terrible problem can be solved. But, you know, there are desperate people who are putting their lives on the line, and there's no clear, easy solution to this.
Yeah, there's so much focus, Wendy, on the tragedy itself, and I think sometimes it's gotten lost in the mix, the tragedy that they were trying to flee.
Absolutely. So, I mean, to me, that's the real story here. You know, why are these people leaving these countries? There's so much strife in war-torn areas still in Africa that we've just stopped talking about. We talk about all these other things happening in Africa, but let's talk about why these people are leaving, why they're putting their children on these boats to leave, right? The good news, very, very small good news today, was that they did find 9 people recently. I think that came out about 2 hours ago in the water. So they're still looking, and that's hopeful. But there's so many lives that have already been lost, and it is such a tragedy.
And you know, here's the thing, and I don't want to toot our own horn here at Arise News. We do seek to cover stories that are not covered by some of the quote-unquote mainstream media. And I don't know that this has gotten as much coverage as it's gotten right here. And so the question becomes, why?
Right.
Well, I think one of there are so many reasons. Partly the fact that these are generally black and brown people is clearly one of them, but also the fact that it happens often out at sea, and so there aren't really a lot of images, which, as we know, TV and newspapers need dramatic images. Unfortunately, the images that we often get are of bodies being brought in, and it's a problem that keeps going on, and it doesn't really change much.
It's part of it because for us as Americans, it's so far away. Is that part of it? Or is it that it's just, as June rightfully said, and I don't know if you were afraid to say it, but this is a safe place, they are black and brown people.
Right.
And the truth is, very often when they are black and brown people, we just don't pay as much attention.
That is exactly the truth. And so I think now that this has really been brought to the attention of the Italian Prime Minister, and people in his party are putting him on blast and saying, look, you've got to do something about this. Enough is enough. Too many lives are being lost. Either we work with these countries to help these people, or we do something to aid their journey to make it better. I don't know what the solution would be, but enough lives have been lost.
Have you all seen any irony in this? I mean, we have been outraged in this country to the degree that we've covered this story. However, some degree of this happens, in our own shores.
This is a worldwide problem. I mean, and the kind of conflict that we're seeing today tends to be interstate, which means that they have a lot of refugees. We have more refugees than ever before, more needy people than ever before, less funds to help them, and more people trying to make it to Europe, to America. Certainly on our southern border, we see it very clearly every single day.
Absolutely. How many times did we turn a boat back to Cuba?
Absolutely. I'm a child of immigrants myself, and my parents came to this country with the idea of having a better life. But these people are not just wanting a better life, they're wanting a life which they're not able to get in their own countries. So again, to me, the focus should be, why are they leaving? What's the strife? How can we help them while they're in their country so that the extra effort of having to get on a boat, having to bring your babies on a boat isn't there? I
guess the one the one positive thing about this is we've now all learned where Eritrea is. Had you heard of Eritrea before?
I have Eritrean friends, so yes, I actually did know.
But I think most Americans probably hadn't, so it certainly raised the awareness of that.
Absolutely.
Let's turn the corner and talk about something else. Of course, the Nobel Prize Committee announced that the Nobel Peace Prize recipient is the OPCW. A lot of people were campaigning for Malala. Were you disappointed that it wasn't Malala?
I was a little disappointed that it wasn't Malala because because she has such a great fan base at such a young age. But at the same time, I'm also kind of happy she didn't get it because she's not pigeonholed by this award. She can really blossom and do all the amazing things that she wants to do, which one of them is become Prime Minister of Pakistan, which I think is fantastic. And just that she's this wonderful image for young women today, to know that you can stand for what you believe in, no matter what the consequences, and still have your voice heard.
And she still has a little bit of life left.
Yes.
It's not like she's at the end of the life. June, you've been monitoring social media. What kind of reactions have you seen?
Well, I think there was a lot of disappointment that the Malala didn't get the prize, although we have seen too that often when people win the Nobel Peace Prize, it does sometimes lead to a clampdown, and it isn't always the best thing for them personally. She's already targeted in Pakistan,
Yes.
as is her family, so that is one perhaps positive side of things. Some people also said, why do you give it to an organization that's just doing their job? But on the other hand, I am of the opinion that this is a good choice. The people from the OPCW are doing a very dangerous job in very difficult circumstances, especially in Syria. And I think, we often see the committee send a message, and I think they're sending a message that pay attention to what's happening in Syria.
Yeah, and it's not just, and the committee made a point in the comments, it wasn't just about their work in Syria, but their work around the world, and that's to be commended, so we congratulate them for that. Before we run out of time, let's turn to this, and this is one of my favorite stories of the week, although I think it has some very, very concerning undertones, and that's this 9-year-old little boy, lives in Minneapolis, somehow got to the airport, got on a plane, flew all the way to Las Vegas. His father thought he was at a friend's house. Right. There are so many questions at this.
So many.
What questions
Yes.
does it raise for you, the situation, Wendy?
Number one question to me is, we all know it takes a village to raise children these days, but how is it that you didn't know where your child was? That's one of my main questions. We haven't seen the mom yet. We've heard from the dad, albeit anonymously. One of the things I'm really kind of interested about this story is that we often in the Black community don't see Black fathers standing up for their children. And this, to me, is a good example of that. We see that there's a mom and a dad who clearly love their child, clearly are engaged with their child, but clearly the child has some issues. They have said that they've tried. Maybe now that they've gotten all this national attention, the child can actually get the help that he needs.
Yeah, what concerns you about this, Jay?
The same thing. The problem that as Wendy says, we've heard in the last day that this child has some what the father called behavioral issues. Mm-hmm. We heard that he went to the airport the day before, took a piece
cased the joint.
Exactly. He took a piece of luggage off the carousel, had someone who was working at the airport to mind it for him while he went to the bathroom. This is not a typical 9-year-old. The confidence, the independence, which in some ways you have to kind of admire.
It is a little admirable, and he stole a truck before and of course crashed it. Right. He snuck his way into a water park. This is a resourceful kid. If nothing else, behavior problems aside, this is a smart kid.
Yeah, he did things at 9 that I don't think I could have done at 19. At 9, I could barely put my socks on, much less get to an airport and get halfway to Vegas.
Right.
If I got the whole way, of course.
And that brings up sort of another question, and Wendy, you brought this up, is what about these parents? They clearly love him. But what do you do with a child like this? And before I get to that question, let's ask this. Should the parents be culpable at all? Because shouldn't you know where your 9-year-old is at all times?
You should, but we all know in today's days, mom is working 2 jobs, dad is working another job. We know the economic situation that we're in the country. It takes a village. We get that. But having the child having that crash a week prior, I think I would have, tried to do a little bit more to be hands-on. But we don't know. There's so many questions and so many extenuating circumstances that we still don't know. My thing is, let's try to get this child's energy funneled the right way, because clearly he has the brain power for it. So maybe if we can get him in an engineering program or something that can really use his skills to the best of his abilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. You need to challenge this child. I'm a veterinarian, so I relate everything to animals. He's kind of like a border collie. You got to give him a job or he becomes destructive. Exactly. This child has to have something to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it reminds me too, the way that we take hackers and we ask them to help us show the flaws in the system, and then we can fix them. Well, this child got through security. We know the hassles we have to go through when we have a ticket, when we have all of the right credentials. A 9-year-old had ID? He apparently snuck by.
I don't think he did have ID. I think he got past all that, which raises a whole other issue, and that is how effective is our security system.
Right. That to me is, probably the thing that on a large scale, on a just, the scope of the danger, not only to himself but to others, that really reveals a huge problem. But I think you're right, that let's have him show us how he did it.
Yeah. It's going to be so interesting. I don't know if they'll ever reveal his identity. The reports are that he is still in foster care, but being returned to his parents this weekend. Right. And I don't know about his parents, but if it were Gussie Turner, my mom, man, would I be in trouble when I got home?
It'd be more than a talking to.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to throw one on you guys, sort of blindside you a little bit, but I know you'll have something to say, and that is this dang government shutdown. Let me start with you. And the polls say a lot of different things, but who do you blame most, Wendy, for this shutdown?
You know, I blame both sides. Honestly, I don't think that one side is less culpable than the other. At the end of the day, American people, general American people, the general society is suffering. People are suffering. They're not able to pay their bills. They're not able to pay their mortgages. Let's figure this out, whether it takes 48 hours in a row or not. Get it done. This is why we pay taxes, to get things done. So I don't understand why it's taking so long.
You're very much in line with a lot of the polls of Americans blame both sides. What about you, June?
I blame the Republicans. If you have a group of Republicans who call themselves the hell no group and they're just not willing to negotiate, I think that's a problem. I think we have the start of this argument was over Obamacare, which was passed by a vote. There was an election last year that confirmed that this was a choice. The people did
Held
not
up
decide.
by the Supreme Court.
Exactly. Why are we arguing about something that is established law, that has been voted upon, that has been found to be constitutional, as you say? I think the tactics that are being used are absolutely irresponsible and should not be. I think we should hold the Republicans' feet to the fire about this.
Well, Wendy, let me come back to you because you blame both sides. Who should blink first then?
Oh dear, that's the million-dollar question. To some degree, I believe it should be the Republican Party that blinks first. I mean, they are the ones who are, and it's the small Tea Party contingent of the Republican Party. Let's be clear that there are some people from the GOP who are really willing to talk and get this thing over with. We need to really figure out how to communicate better, I think, those folks in D.C. And as I said, I want a marathon session. Yeah. Just get it done.
Yeah, well, and what's so curious to me is it seems like it's been reported, and I don't know if this is really the case, but that, a very small number of fringe far-right members of the GOP, the Tea Party, is controlling the party, if not fracturing the party. But it seems to me, if the numbers were that skewed, tell me what you think, June, that they might not be able to exercise that much influence.
I do wonder about that. We hear that even moderate Republicans are worried that they can't make any concessions because they'll be primaried, as the new verb goes, that somebody from the far right, somebody from the Tea Party will hold their votes up to, and people say, how could these people compromise? Compromise is now being seen as a dirty word, which is ridiculous. That's the point of government. The point is to compromise. The point is to do what's best for the majority of people. And I think we're seeing that the polls are negative to the Republicans' behavior. People do not want the government to be shut down. And although there are some anti-government Republicans especially who want to prove that we don't need all this government stuff, I think people know that you do.
I find that amazing to me because the poll after poll after poll has said the Americans do not want to see the government shut down. They do not think this dispute over the Affordable Care Act, I refuse to call it Obamacare, should be a part of this discussion. But yet the politicians on Capitol Hill still forge forward. And is it arrogance? Is that the right word for that? That they would do that, the bodaciousness that against American public sentiment, they would forge ahead with this fight and remain in this impasse is just amazing to me.
I agree.
I mean, I do believe that some of it is arrogance, absolutely. And as we move forward to the midterm elections, I hope people are remembering this now so that they can bring the same mindset when it's time to vote again.
But here's the problem. The American public has a very short memory. The elections are next year, but
absolutely.
That's a long time away.
I know.
All right, because I enjoy you all so much more. Let's talk about one more thing, and that, of course, the Supreme Court is considering several new cases. They just came into session just this past week, and one of them is around campaign finance reform. And I cannot remember his name. My executive producer helped me remember, McCutcheon. McCutcheon is a part of this suit, saying he wants to, and he thinks that Americans should be able to give as much money as they want to as many candidates as they want. June, what's your thoughts on this? Should we, if you have the money, should you be able to support whatever political causes you want to?
I have to say, as much as I dislike the power of money in politics and how much influence rich people can have, which feels somehow anti-democratic, at the same time, this rule that the limit of per candidate is one thing, but the total limit, I mean, if you can give, what is it, $2,800 to each candidate, why should you then only have a certain number of candidates that you can give that to? I have to admit that that does give me some pause, even though in general, my view is that...
June, I have to say I'm surprised at you.
Are you?
All right, very quickly, what's your thought?
I think that there should be limits ensued. I mean, although we do have limits now, and you have situations like super PACs and the Koch brothers who are doing all kinds of things with their money, so, you know, we'll see what happens.
All right. This has been fun. Thank you. I enjoyed you guys so much. Wendy Wilson from Essence and June Thomas from Slate.com. Appreciate it. Come back again, please,
Thank you.
okay?
I'd love to.
Have a great weekend. And you're watching Arise America.